Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now, let's get into today's tale. My dad always said, "You're too sensitive, you won't last in the real world." So when my supervisor mocked my ideas in front of the entire staff, I swallowed my pride. "You always have a plan, huh?" he sneered. 1 month later, the corporation implemented my system across 14 branches. My supervisor walked past my desk and muttered, "Guess I was wrong. I spent most of my adult life believing that being quiet meant being weak." My dad made sure I understood that I can still hear his voice like a broken loop in my head. "You're too sensitive, Simon. The world's going to eat you alive." It didn't matter if I got good grades, landed a decent job, or avoided the trouble that swallowed up my brother. All he saw was someone too soft, too reserved, too careful to survive in the real world. So when my supervisor humiliated me in front of everyone, mocked my work, my ideas, my way of thinking, I did what I'd been taught to. I swallowed it. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I went home that night and sat in the dark thinking maybe they were all right about me. But I didn't stop working. I didn't stop planning. Because even if they didn't see it, I knew what I had created could change everything. I just didn't know how fast it would go. Within 4 weeks, the very system Garrett Mason, my supervisor, laughed at was not only approved by corporate, it was deployed to 14 branches. Suddenly, I was being invited to meetings I used to be excluded from. People started addressing me by name, not as that IT guy. And Garrett Mason, he walked past my desk one morning, the same one where he'd embarrassed me weeks earlier, and muttered under his breath, "Guess I was wrong." It should have felt like a win, but it didn't. Not yet. Because the story wasn't just about him, or the job, or the money. It was about proving something to people who stopped listening to me years ago. Northbridge. Freight sat in a boxy gray office park, tucked behind a chain of abandoned retail stores in Cleveland's Midtown district. The building didn't look like much, just glass and metal and years of fluorescent fatigue. But it held the only version of purpose I had. After college, I was 34, still renting a small apartment near Buckeye Road, driving the same Ford Focus I'd had since 2010. People noticed, especially my older brother Marcus Reed. "Are you ever going to move out of that shoebox?" he asked one evening over drinks at my dad's place. "You make good money, act like it. I'm fine where I am." "You're always fine, Simon. That's your problem." Marcus Reedon had a way of speaking like he was always on the edge of yelling even when he was calm. He worked in finance, made double my salary, and loved to remind people he had 2 kids and a mortgage in Shaker Heights. Dad ate it up. I was just the IT guy in their eyes, the quiet son who didn't make noise or waves. "Real men take up space," Dad said once. "Don't hide behind screens." I didn't respond. Just looked down and let the weight of those words sit on my chest like they always did. At work, it wasn't much better. I reported to Garrett Mason. Garrett Mason, mid-40s, square jaw, firm handshake and a laugh that always felt a little too loud. He'd been in logistics his whole life and didn't trust anyone under 40 who didn't wear cufflinks. I wore hoodies. He wore disdain. Our department handled systems optimization, data tracking, routing, inventory flows. I'd been quietly observing a major inefficiency in the routing system for almost 6 months. Trucks were crisscrossing unnecessarily, wasting fuel and time. It wasn't obvious unless you drilled into the numbers, which no one ever did, but I did because that's how I work. Quietly, precisely, obsessively. So I built a proposal. It was detailed. Painfully so. I mapped out how implementing dynamic routing could increase delivery efficiency by over 20%, reduce fuel costs, and free up driver hours. I included code snippets, projections, and a sample UI. I even beta tested it with 2 of our oldest branches. They reported back glowing results. I brought it to our weekly team meeting, sat at the far end of the table with a USB stick and a stack of printed reports. I waited for Garrett Mason to finish his weekend golf story, then cleared my throat. "I've been working on a project I think could really help with our route planning." Garrett Mason waved his hand. "Another app?" "It's not an app. It's a dynamic system. pulls real-time variables and adjusts. He looked around the room, smirking. Simon, buddy, you always have a plan, huh? Laughter. Not all mean-spirited, but enough of it was. Even Linda Chen from HR smiled awkwardly. I'm just saying, if reinventing the wheel was profitable, I'm sure you'd find a way to pitch it. The words stung more than I let on, but I knew better than to push back. Instead, I nodded, sat down, and slid the papers back into my folder. The rest of the meeting was a blur. My ears were hot. My throat was dry. I went home and sat in my car for 10 minutes before going inside. I kept hearing his voice. You always have a plan, huh? I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling and thought about quitting, thought about how nobody ever took me seriously. Not my father, not Marcus Reed, not Garrett Mason. Thought about how much easier it would be to just stop trying, but I didn't. Instead, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in months, Vanessa Cruz. She was a corporate strategist who visited our branch a while back for a system rollout. We talked briefly about optimization. She gave me her card and said, I like how you think. I sent her everything. The report, the beta results, the working model. She responded 2 hours later. This is incredible, let's talk. We had a meeting the next morning over Zoom. She brought in 2 other directors from corporate strategy. They asked questions. I answered calmly, carefully. This time no one laughed. They wanted a full-scale implementation plan within 3 weeks. So I disappeared. I took 2 weeks of PTO and stayed holed up in my apartment. I refined the model, expanded the UI, and integrated real-time weather tracking. I even contacted a few vendors for potential partnerships. I didn't tell anyone at the Cleveland office, not Garrett Mason, not even my teammates. The week after I submitted the final proposal, I got a call from Martin Gale, Corporate VP of Logistics. This could change how we run our operations nationwide, he said. I'd like you to lead the rollout for our top 14 branches. I stared at the wall for a long time after the call ended. That Friday, an email went out to the entire company announcing the new system. My name was in the subject line, introducing Smearl GX, a new era of route intelligence created by Simon. Delaney. The Monday I returned to the office, people looked at me differently. Linda Chen actually stood up when I entered the conference room. Garrett Mason didn't speak, didn't look at me. Later that day, he walked past my desk, stopped, sipped his coffee. Guess I was wrong, he muttered, then he walked away. Garrett Mason never congratulated me, not once. He didn't need to. To his silence, said more than any forced praise ever could. Something about the way he passed by my desk without slowing, the way he avoided eye contact in meetings. It reminded me of the exact tone my dad used to take when I achieved something. He couldn't dismiss but didn't want to validate either. After the system launched, the energy in the office shifted. People were cautious around me at first, like they couldn't decide if I had just gotten lucky or if I had been hiding in plain sight all along. By the end of that week, 3 different branch managers called me directly to ask about training modules. One of them even joked, didn't know the quiet guy was building the future over there. I chuckled politely. I was used to it by now. Garrett Mason, though, he was unraveling slowly. I could see it. His jokes stopped landing. His usual Monday morning walkthroughs turned into 10-minute check-ins. He once barked at Jake Sullivan, or in turn for formatting a report the wrong way, then immediately apologized. The guy who used to slam his fist on the table during meetings now just faded into the corner. It didn't take long for people to notice. 2 weeks later, a company-wide announcement stated that our branch would be undergoing a structural reshuffling. Garrett Mason's title didn't change, but his responsibilities did. He was now tasked with overseeing regional implementation oversight, which basically meant making sure other branches were using the system I built and reporting back to me. We never addressed it directly. No confrontation, no man-to-man moment, just a cold transition. Every report he submitted was polished but sterile. No opinion, no feedback, just numbers. If he resented me, he never said it, but he didn't have to. My life outside work didn't reflect the change. That part stayed the same. Dad didn't ask about the promotion. Marcus Reed didn't mention the corporate newsletter that had my name on it. At the next family dinner, he went on about refinancing his second property like I hadn't done something significant. I waited for someone to say something. No one did. So I sat in silence, passing mashed potatoes to the same people who never really saw me. It all came to a head one Saturday night at my dad's house. Marcus Reed had stopped by with his youngest, and I brought over some system reports to review before Monday's meeting, still working on weekends. Marcus Reed smirked. "Jesus, Simon, are you allergic to daylight or something?" I gave him a tight smile and didn't respond. He leaned back on the couch, flipping through his phone. "You know, if you actually wanted to move up, you'd stop hiding behind emails and data sheets, start networking, getting your hands dirty. I stared at him. "The system I built saved the company $4 million this quarter." He blinked. "You built that?" "Yeah." There was a pause. He looked at Dad, who kept eating his steak like nothing happened. "That's the new thing at your company?" "Saw a mention in some newsletter." I nodded. Marcus Reed scoffed. "Didn't think they let the back office guys play with the big toys." "That's the problem," I said, my voice low. "You think it's a game?" Marcus Reed raised an eyebrow. "Easy, man, just saying. Never figured you for the type." Dad finally looked up. "So what? They used your idea. Don't let it go to your head. That's what they pay you for." That's when I stood up, took my folder, grabbed my coat. Dad watched me like I was being dramatic. "Where? Are you going?" "Home." "You don't need to get touchy. We're just talking." But we weren't. We never had. Not really. Back at the office, I buried myself in the next phase of development. Smart Logics wasn't just a routing tool anymore. With corporate support, I started exploring predictive analytics, something that would anticipate disruptions before they happened. Truck maintenance needs, seasonal demand, driver fatigue patterns. The deeper I went, the more support I got from higher-ups. They invited me to quarterly reviews, stakeholder briefings, even asked me to present at a regional logistics summit in Pittsburgh. But the higher I climbed, the more I realized that the people at my own branch, the ones I used to work shoulder to shoulder with, had stopped treating me like a colleague. Some respected me, others resented me. Linda Chen barely spoke to me anymore. Dave from procurement made snide comments about nerds running the world. Even Jake Sullivan, the intern who used to shadow me eagerly, started acting like he didn't know where I sat. And Garrett Mason, he kept his head down, worked quietly. Every now and then I'd catch him looking over during conference calls like he wanted to say something, but he never did. The final crack came during a systems audit, 3 months into the rollout. One of the branches, Toledo, was reporting inconsistencies in their data, sync delays, vehicle locks, wrong ETAs being generated. At first, I thought it was a software issue, but when I pulled the metadata logs, it became clear someone had manually adjusted system parameters at that branch, someone with clearance. Clearance that Garrett Mason had. I confronted him privately. We sat in the office break room, same table we used to eat lunch at, same vending machine humming in the corner. "You alter the dispatch settings?" I said quietly. Garrett Mason didn't deny it, just leaned back. "They were complaining," he said. "Drivers didn't like being tracked so closely. Said it felt invasive." "That's the whole point," I said. "To optimize." "I know," he said, "but they won't follow a system they don't trust. You have to know when to ease up." "You undermine the system," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You didn't even tell me." He looked away. "You're good at what you do, Simon. No one's denying that. But people aren't algorithms. They push back." I stared at him. "And what about you?" He met my eyes finally. "I've been doing this for 20 years, and then some kid comes in and rewrites the whole map. I didn't do this to make you obsolete." "Garrett Mason." He smiled bitterly. "Didn't you?" Garrett Mason's words lingered with me long after that break room conversation. "Didn't you?" I hadn't built the system to erase him. That wasn't the plan. But deep down, I understood what he meant. Smart Logics had changed the rules. It had shifted the power dynamic. People like Garrett Mason, who thrived on dominance and tradition, were now answering to data they didn't fully understand. To someone like me, and he wasn't the only one, uncomfortable with that. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle forms of resistance across several branches: manual overrides, delayed system updates, incorrect tagging of delivery zones, small things that added up. I launched an internal audit tool, quietly tracking inconsistencies and flagging locations where user behavior was deliberately undermining the system. And sure enough, Garrett Mason's assigned branches were lighting up like warning flares. Documented everything, not for revenge, not at first, but as a record, a receipt of the resistance. Then came the quarterly executive summit, hosted in our Cleveland headquarters. Corporate asked me to present the next stage of SmearLog X predictive fleet health monitoring and real-time rerouting based on live weather and traffic conditions, a major expansion, and I was leading it. The conference room was packed. Victor Hayes sat front and center, along with Allison Merles, several regional managers, and VPs from finance and operations. Garrett Mason was in the back. I saw him when I entered, arms crossed, face unreadable. I walked them through the success. Metrics: operating costs down 17%, delivery times improved by 21%, fuel expenses reduced by over $3 million. But then I did something unexpected. I clicked to the next slide. It showed a map of branch-level system compliance: red, yellow, green. Several of Garrett Mason's branches were bright red. Over the past 2 months, we've observed strategic non-compliance in at least 5 branches, I said calmly. Not due to technical limitations, but deliberate overrides of system parameters. The room was quiet. I've documented every instance, including user-level locks, all authorized under the same regional access. I paused. Garrett Mason heads turned. Some gasped. Garrett Mason stood up. You're twisting this. I adjusted the systems based on driver feedback. Human factors matter. Then you should have brought that up during the weekly review, I replied. You didn't. You made those changes unilaterally, which compromised regional efficiency and cost the company close to $240,000, and lost optimization. Martinell leaned forward. Is this verified? Yes, sir, I said, backed by system logs and mirrored backups. The full report is in your inbox. Martin turned to Garrett Mason. You'll be placed on administrative leave pending review. Garrett Mason didn't say anything, just stared at me. There was no malice in his eyes this time, just defeat. I watched him walk out of the room and I felt nothing. No glee, no spike of adrenaline, just closure. After the summit, corporate offered me a new role, Director of Strategic Optimization. I would report directly to the executive board and oversee future implementations across all branches, not just logistics, but warehousing and customer services too. I accepted. They also gave me a discretionary team. I handpicked 5 people, 3 analysts from other cities, a developer I knew from college, and 1 intern who had once shadowed me but left the company early because no one takes people like me seriously. His name was Thompson. He came back, and on his first day I said, "They will now back home." Things began to shift too. Marcus Reed called one evening casual as ever. "Hey, heard about that executive thing." "Congrats." "Thanks," I said cautiously. He paused. "Didn't think you had it in you." "I know," I said flatly. Another pause. "I was wrong," he said, voice lower. "That was all." He didn't say more, but it was the closest he'd ever come to admitting it. The final piece was Dad. I visited him on a Sunday afternoon, brought over a new thermostat system. His old one barely worked. "You're always fiddling with that," he said, squinting at the screen. "Don't trust anything without a dial." "I built a system that manages freight for over 100 trucks," I said quietly. "I think I can handle your thermostat." He chuckled. "A rare thing. You doing all right then?" "I am." "Are you running the place now?" "Parts of it," he grunted. "Never thought you'd last there, to be honest." "I know." He looked at me for a long time, but I was wrong. I didn't answer. Just kept installing the thermostat, because that was enough. No, I'm not loud. I'm not flashy. I don't make speeches or post on LinkedIn about hustle culture. But I changed. The company from the inside out, with numbers, with consistency, with restraint. People like Garrett Mason taught me how to wait. People like my father taught me how to endure. And people like me, we don't explode. We build brick by quiet brick, until one day you walk into a room and realize you own the place. They told you you'd never survive. Told you you'd never survive.